and it's sponsored by Premier Pet Supplies. So I just started the record button. The good news is, well, I kind of like videos, but the good news is there's no videos today. It's not a lot of information, but it's information that you will be thinking about quite a lot as you go through this with me. So I'd like to share my screen. Give me one moment and we will start. Okay, so hopefully, let's make that a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. Here we are. So the presentation today, our topic is the bribe, the punishment, and flooding. And I've picked this because I do feel that there's a need to know what these techniques are, what they involve. Are they wrong or right is not what I will be addressing in this session, because that's another topic entirely. But what you need to know about it, what are these techniques? And are they effective? Do they help your future leader dogs learn? So hopefully, when we're done with this, you can take something home with it. We are sponsored by Premier Pet Supplies. They give 20% off for our puppy raisers. So visit them sometime. They've got a great selection and they're very supportive in helping all our puppy raisers when they go there to shop. All right, so we talk a lot about positive reinforcement. Through this past year and a half, I think our virtual sessions, we've tried to incorporate it in every session, how to use it in our training, how it helps our future leader dogs. This is the training method that we use. But I'd like to talk today about bribes, about punishment, and about flooding. The reason I want to talk about them is because there is an ineffectiveness when they're used. They're methods that are outdated and have been proven not to be effective for learning for our learner, which here is our future leader dog puppies, and they do more harm. So we'll address each of these individually, and I'm sure you might have some questions, and I hope you do, because I'd like to clarify any questions you may have or any confusion. So as we go through it, type it in your chat box because I might not have my support there. I know Laura Fisher is busy today. Melissa Raymond and Barry Lynn Wood are both off, but type it in your chat box and we're going to look through those at the end. So I'd like to start off by this quote. And this is a quote that I really like by, whoops, I flipped to the other side, A. Milne, and it's from Winnie the Pooh. And she says how some people talk to animals, but not many listen. That's the problem. So I hope as you're going through this, you keep this quote in your mind. And we're going to start out with the bribe. The bribe, always, as always, if you've been to my sessions before, I love definitions. And I like a definition because it's very clear cut. It gives you exactly what that word means, what that action means, and then you can proceed from there. So a bribe, in plain simple terms, is an offer made to get a dog or learner to do something he chooses not to. So for example, if you do that, you can have this, or I will make it your worthwhile if you do that. So when you look at these three circles on the screen, you notice how they progressively get bigger. And there's a connection here. Sometimes a bribe doesn't always start out intentionally. It could be accidental. Goodness, can you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So it blipped out on my end. Thank you, Mary, and whoever that was. I appreciate it. So the bribe starts out sometimes unintentional, accidental, but it still starts out. And when it starts out, because it worked, it tends to become a habit. So the way it could start out is I might have some kibble in my hand because I have all the good intentions of marking yes and then giving it to my puppy. But then I learned that it really works. When I say yes, I've got the hand in my kibble and my puppy's listening to me. And then it becomes a habit. We carry the kibble in our hand, right? But I want to give you an example of a bribe using a child. And this kind of illustrates where the bribe can work and what can go wrong. So my little niece, when she would go to the physician's office when she was 3 years old, she would be deathly afraid of the doctor, just strangers in general. And my sister said, "You know what? I've got these really cool cherry lollipops. And after you're done with this appointment, I've got them in my purse. We're going to have it. And you know what? It'll be okay." So the first 2 times, and she was about 3, it was fine. The third time she went in, "I got your cherry lollipop, okay?" She's like, "Okay, mama." And they go in and she gets a shot. Vaccinations, right? So the fourth time, my sister takes her again and she says, "I've got your cherry lollipop, okay? It's gonna be all right." And my niece looks at her and says, "I don't want your cherry lollipop. You can keep it." So, what I'm trying to say is that the bribe starts out unintentional, and as it progresses, it's just focused on the bribe, whether it's a lollipop, the kibble, but there's no learning going on. My niece didn't learn to accept the strangers. My niece didn't learn to understand what that whole visit was about. She just learned to focus on that lollipop. So that's something that I'd like you to think about. Now, is there any learning happening? Or is that puppy just focused so much on that food that's in the hand, or that will come out, or that's behind their back, or that they might be just holding to the side? Can our puppies see when we have food in our hands? Oh, definitely. I used to think, oh, if I have food in my hand and I put it behind my back, they might not know, but they know. So that starts out unintentional. Then we find that it works because we can really deliver it fast. And then it becomes a habit, both for the learner, which is our puppy, right? And for us, our puppy learns that I got to watch for that food instead of I got to wait for that cue. So, what does a bribe look like? It could be the first picture with that cookie up in the air and the dog's waiting. So is that dog waiting for a recall? Is that dog waiting to do something? We don't know, right? Because the big thing is that cookie. Now, the picture in the middle, I think, just exemplifies the bribe in itself. This dog is so focused on that big porky sausage that nothing else is there, nothing else. And then the last picture, again, if you see, I like this last picture with the little, it looks like a carrot, but it could be a cookie. The eyes are so transfixed on that, it almost looks cross-eyed to me. So before we leave the bribe, I'd like you to type into your chat if you know, and if you don't, no worries. What's the difference between a lure and a bribe? Because there is definitely a difference. I'm going to give you a couple moments. Well, I take a sip of tea because it's cold here. So what's the difference? Because I'd like to clarify it for you. What is a lure and what is a bribe? We use a lure quite frequently in training, even in raising our future leader dogs. So, Lori, thank you for your response. You said a lure gets the puppy to transport, move somewhere. A bribe gets them to do something they don't want to do or dislike. You hit the nail on the lure. It is transport. You can move them somewhere. You can also start a behavior with a lure, correct? In the down position, the sit position, because we have a piece of food in our hand. So I'd like to, allure gets their attention. You're definitely right, Joanne. So allure is a magnet. But the difference is that this lure eventually fades out. So we may start by luring our puppy into a sit. So the food is to their nose and they're sitting, or we might lure them down and then treat them down there. But we fade that lure out. It should not be a part of that cue or that behavior. It's got to be faded out fast. Okay. Otherwise, what does it become? Begins with a B. It could become the bribe. Okay. So let me see. Kristen said, to me, a lure is used when there is a new thing being introduced and to help the puppy begin learning. A bribe is something they already know. You're getting close. So here's the thing with a bribe, though, that's missed. You guys have wonderful answer. The bribe becomes, if it's not, watched out for, a part of the behavior. And without it, sometimes our puppies don't do the behavior. So think about it. If I've always got that kibble and I started out unintentionally, and then it progressed to it became great and I could use it, then it became the true bribe. My puppy, and we're going to bring in Petunia. If for those of you who don't know, Petunia is my pretend puppy. Petunia does not sit until she sees that bribe in my hand because that's a part of that whole behavior chain. So that's a difference between those two. Now, we get into the juice of another one. There's three juices here that I'm squeezing for you today. The first one was a bribe. The second one is the punishment. Now, before we start on the punishment, defining it and all that, there's a lot of negative connotation to the act of punishment, and rightfully so, right? The word itself, it's negative. But for our purposes, I'm going to reiterate, we are looking at the effectiveness of it. We are not looking at the right or the wrong of it. We are looking at how effective is this method of training and what is it? Okay. So now let's get into the definition. Punishment. It's something that is done to a learner, for our sakes, our puppies, that they do not like. It's a rough treatment or handling inflicted or suffered by a learner. So, does it work? Okay. Is our puppy learning anything? And who defines if it's punishment? Three questions. So, I'm giving you a lot of questions today because I want your thought to start working. So, first, does it work? Oh, of course it works. That's why it's been used, right? The next, is the puppy learning everything? Of course, the puppy is learning something, not everything. The puppy is learning something all the time, whether we use punishment, positive reinforcement. But the question after that question is, what is the puppy learning? Okay. And what defines punishment? The puppy, the learner. We are not the ones, if we are training or teaching, who define what punishment is. Punishment is unique to the person receiving it or to the individual or the learner receiving it. All right. So for this slide, I'm laying down four things for you and how punishment affects them. First of all, is it effective? What about the confidence of our puppies? What about the health of our puppies? And then does it ultimately lead to them reaching their success of being a guide dog? Okay. So first of all, is it effective? Of course it's effective, but at what cost? The first leash pop will get the puppy's attention. The puppy will learn that this can happen. But will the puppy learn anything other than how to avoid that leash pop? Will the puppy learn to heel effectively? Will the puppy learn to walk loose leash effectively? Or is the puppy learning to avoid that leash pop? And are they pulling more and more away from us? Okay. So success. Success is measured for us by, are we laying the foundation for our puppies to become future guide dogs, right? All right, so that's something you want to consider. The second thing, confidence. Will punishment allow our puppies decision-making skills? I think you probably already know the answer to that, especially with the previous slide. If a puppy, if a learner is worried about that punishment coming, will they be able to make decisions effectively? No, right? They're going to be thinking, how can I avoid that pull, that yank? How can I avoid that pulling of my body or pushing of my body? And when they encounter something new, how effective will they be to handle it in their environment? Confidence is a big, big thing for our guide dogs. For our raisers who have done more than one puppy, you know that. You know how confident a dog has to be. And for our new raisers, imagine a dog guiding someone consistently that's blind and visually impaired and listening to them right, left, heel, forward, wait, stop, whatever. And then all of a sudden, the dog just stops, even though their blind person is telling them forward. They stops because they made a decision that there's a car coming and no, that's confidence, right? So does punishment give that to our puppies? No. How about health? What does punishment do for health? It's a stressor. It creates anxiety. It creates fear. This can be manifested physically in our dogs. They might start pulling their hair out. They might itch. They a lot of different ways stress happens. Maybe they start getting nausea and vomiting. I know one of my dogs that I trained way, way back before I started raising puppies for leader dogs would get so stressful, she would gag and vomit and throw up. What about their physical health? If a dog is constantly moving with you, another factor in their physical health, if they're, and we're going to consistently go back to our loose leash example, is there, if they're trying to avoid that leash pop, they may not be paying attention to a little dip in the sidewalk. They may trip, they may hurt themselves. Okay, last but not least is our guide dog. That's our ultimate goal, to have our puppies matched up with one of our blind and visually impaired clients. So there's a thing called transference. So as puppy raisers, we work, we work, we work, and we want to lay this beautiful foundation. That's going to be transferred on to their next stage when they learn to be a guide dog, when our guide dog mobility instructors, our GDMIs, step in to take over the process. This is a transference for our dogs. They transfer very easily from they're learning from one situation to another. If they have learned through punishment, there's a lot of breaks going on. There's a lot of mountains they may need to climb because our GDMIs are not going to learn where their cowering away comes from, where their lack of confidence comes from. So there's that factor as well. All right. So, wrapping up punishment. I read this article. I've read a lot of stuff on punishment, but this article by Valerie V. Tynes is just wonderful. Short, sweet, with examples, but she hit the nail on the head. For punishment to be effective, the following three things are required. Only three, guys. Only three. That's to make punishment effective. And I was like, oh, only three? Let's see. It must occur every time the unwanted behavior occurs, number one. Number two, it must be administered within 1 to 2 seconds of the inappropriate behavior. Number three, it must be aversive enough to stop that behavior in the future, but not aversive enough to frighten the learner. Wow. So I'm going to give you an example. Petunia. And this is from Valerie's article. She used the same example, but I'm going to plug Petunia in. So Petunia likes to get on the couch. And it's not going to be me. It's going to be another person that's raising Petunia because I know better. But they drag Petunia off. They're yelling because she's on the couch. Bad girl, Petunia. They pull her off by the scruff. So Petunia is learning what right now? You don't have to type it in, but if you'd like to, you can. Petunia is learning what right now? What has she learned? Is there anything she learned by that whole interaction? Whether it was the no, Petunia, whether it was the clapping of my hands, whether it was the pulling of her collar. So what did she learn? She learned that when, let's say that person was there, because it's not going to be me. I don't do that. When that person is there, they shouldn't be on the couch. She should not be on the couch because bad stuff happens. There's yelling, there's pulling of her scruff, there's clapping of her hands and moving towards her aggressively. She learns that when that person's there, I don't get on the couch. But does Petunia learn never to get on the couch? We don't know. Now, here's an alternative method that will work more effectively. And notice I didn't use that's better, that's not as bad as the other, but it works effectively. When Petunia gets on the couch, I either call her to come or I take a frozen Kong and lay it on the ground. When she's off, I barricade the couch, and I barricade because I've had a puppy that's done it. I've put chairs around my couch, just 3 or 4, and it doesn't have to be forever while you have your puppy. I also put plastic on it. I've also noticed at Home Depot, they have those rubber mats that have those spikes in them. They just don't hurt your puppy, but they're rubbery, the ones I'm talking about that you put your feet on. And I've put that on one of my puppy for on not on of my puppies, sorry, on the sofa, and then put plastic on top of it. So the plastic itself is enough because it's slippery and sliding. So that deteriorates. And then you reward. And then when I'm not there, Petunia goes in the crate. Because guess what? If I'm not there, I can't watch her, right? So I want you to think about number 3, being fearful of the handler, Pam said. Very good. Kristen, you're right. Getting a lot of attention. So some dogs might be fearful, but some dogs, all of that, Petunia, off, and pulling her and clapping my hands, they might think it's a game. You're very right. So very good on that. But I want you to focus on number 3, everyone. Punishment has to be aversive enough to stop the behavior. So it has to be so strong and negative to stop it. But it has to be enough to not to frighten the learner. So this is where I'm laughing again and again. How can you be so aversive and not frighten, but have it work, but not so it doesn't frighten the learner? It just doesn't make sense to me. But that's what you need, right? So now if you look at this paw print, I put this up here for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of things on this are obvious. What is punishment? I mentioned that punishment is what that learner, what that dog person perceives as punishment, not what we think is punishment. So you look at this paw print, you see threatening, yelling, using pressure, coercing, poking, hitting, glaring. That's a big one, hitting. Because I caught my son recently got a puppy and he has this thing where he's like, Toby? I'm like, what are you doing? I don't know if he's getting excited there about with you looking at him or what are you doing? Or is he like intimidated? I don't know. But either way, Jay, it's not effective. So glaring, I never thought of glaring, but when I saw it on here, it could be a punishment for some dogs. Prodding, blocking, pushing, a lot of things on this. All right, so that was the second juice. The third juice is this flooding. Flooding is something that I I knew of, but I really didn't know the term until about 15 years ago. Um, and I don't know if any of you have ever encountered the definition of flooding or if this is the first time you're hearing of it, but it's something that was used quite frequently and sometimes still is. So, flooding is a prolonged exposure to a stimulus until the dog eventually stops reacting. It's the opposite of desensitization. It's far more stressful than any of the other treatment strategies. And it can stimulate an increase in fear. So this picture on the right is definitely not, this is just a puppy going through the puddle. And the reason I didn't use a lot of videos, because first of all, I don't have any videos of bribing, punishing, or flooding for my own personal dogs. But when I searched these videos, they just didn't feel good to look at. And I did not want to share something with you that didn't feel good for me to look at. So this picture on the right of this old puppy going through the puddles, and it's not what flooding is, but it's what I would like you to think of flooding and not have other pictures for you. Mike says, if you have a puppy that is not fazed by anything and is doing things to get attention, how do you address the behavior? It seems that luring. Okay, Mike, those are great thoughts and a question, and I'm going to come back to that one. All right, but coming back to flooding. I could give you a lot of examples on flooding. I mean, a lot. Um, but here's the thing. This little slide, it really pulled it for me. It really pulled everything together. Um, when we say flooding, it's almost like saying, get used to it. So I'm going to flip the table and say that if you had your worst fear, and let's say one of these was your worst fear, would these therapies alleviate or take away your fear? So, for example, I have a husband who's afraid of heights. He really is. Um, if he did mile high meditation, so he's not afraid of flights, but he's extremely afraid of heights. We went to the Grand Canyon, and I don't know if any of you have, but they have that walkout bridge with the glass underneath. And I had never known how deathly afraid he is of heights until that moment. We had gotten in, he had a smile on his face. He had come out there because he loved all of us and he wanted the photographs. And after the photograph, he just froze. And I said, let's go. And our kid said, let's go. And he says, I just can't. I can't move. And then it dawned on all of us and we felt horrible, horrible. So we asked him to close his eyes and we talked about all bunch of nonsense stuff and we got him off of there. So mile high meditation, would he have been able to meditate at that moment? He could not move, let alone think about anything. What about a snake pit pedicure? I'm really not afraid of snakes because I grew up with a lot of them when I was younger and a little girl in the area that we lived in. So I'm not afraid of them, but even I would not want a pedicure with them. So what about the hypodermic massage? If you're afraid of needles and someone's massaging you, oh my. Oh, what about a tarantula facial? Spiders, again, I'm not afraid of them, but those fuzzy things walking around while you're giving me a facial, what if they land on my mouth? Oh, right? Um, so, these are things that we can visualize. But here are some things to talk about our puppies. And I've noticed these with our puppies. In the past, there's been a puppy that was deathly afraid of a fire truck with their sirens, with their lights coming flashing. And the puppy first tried to bark, tried to back away, tried to scoot back, was going in all corners of everywhere. And the raiser was trying to help out and say, it's okay, trying to give him a treat, trying to give him kibble. It's okay, trying to pick him up. And the puppy's trying to jump off. Finally, that puppy just laid on the ground and shut down. So that's pretty similar to what my husband experienced, right? There's a flooding, and it was unintentional both times, whether it was for that puppy, the razor meant no wrong, or whether it was for me and my family when we got that picture, right? Over the Grand Canyon. For us, we were like, oh my God, cool, look at all those rocks down there. And my poor husband's just with his big eyes smiling, but he shut down, and the puppy shut down. So these are two Similar examples of flooding. Let me give you one more example of flooding. And this again, I witnessed. A raiser decided to take her puppy to an elementary school to expose them to children. And this was pre-pandemic. And she was waiting for her, children to come out. And she said, VJ, it's going to be used to kids then because I only have one son and, he's older, but my friend has these kids. They're in elementary school. So this little puppy was about maybe 3 months old, and these children come. It's a puppy, right? Oh, can we pet your puppy? Sure, sure, sure. The puppy started snapping and barking. So instead of shutting down, the puppy started reacting, right? So here's the thing. You have your puppy avoiding first, your puppy trying to get away, avoiding, shutting down. But then guess what? You get the reactivity because they've tried everything else. So this flooding starts out sometimes very unintentional. Usually in our cases currently, it is unintentional. We just don't realizing it. But it could end up all the way to reactivity and aggression. So forcing a dog into a frightening situation is definitely not socialization, nor is it desensitization. All right, so we talked all about the juices. I have this slide that I'd really like to go over with you. Um, Positive and negative, I mentioned a couple of times in previous sessions that they don't mean good or bad. And I think a couple of the other coordinators mentioned it as well. Positive just means adding something in, and negative means taking something away. So the addition of something is positive. It doesn't necessarily have to be good. The taking away of something is negative, and it's not necessarily bad. So again, I've stuck with a loose leash example. I have two examples here, the one in the red and the one in the green. When training our puppies in loose leash, I want you to look at these two examples, and I hope you can understand, excuse me. So the reinforced behavior in loose leash walking, and then the punish behavior in pulling on the leash. So let's start with the red and end on the green. So you see the positive punishment. They're adding, remember, positive is adding something in. Here, the handler is adding in the leash pop and the pull and the tug. And here you can notice that bad stuff is happening. And that's what decreases that, that behavior, the pulling, right? So you see this little puppy here, and I don't know if that puppy's thinking yikes or something else, but the puppy is learning that there's a leash pop. There's something that's not good, that doesn't feel good that's coming. So no more pulling, leash correction, scolding when he pulls. Those are all things that are added so that it is a positive addition to something, right? So remember, not necessarily good. Now, let's look at the negative R that's on the bottom. So negative means that something is taken away. And here what's taken away is the leash popping, the pulling, the yanking, the jerking, because the dog is not pulling ahead, all right? So you see it says, I better watch out. That dog on the bottom is saying, I better watch out. Is that dog actually learning anything? Or I think this illustration is pretty powerful. Lily Chen's really good with her illustrations. That dog's looking at that handle in the person's hand, isn't it? Right? So the dog's learning that they've got to be aware. Is the dog really learning to stay in heel position and heel and do loose leash? It's very, very unlikely. So now let's go to the green. Positive again, remember, just because it's green and we're positive reinforcement trainers, just think of it as positive as putting something into that training. And here you're adding the good stuff to increase that behavior. So this trainer is adding in the treats every time the puppy stays in loose leash, stays in heel. They're just adding something in. Okay, I hope I got you up till now. And here you can see the cartoon says lights, which is cool. But again, positive, we're just adding something to it. Negative, right? You're like, well, we don't do anything negative, EJ. Of course we do. We're taking something away, right? Negative means taking something away, right? So here, when we're training, what is the negative that we're doing? What is it that we're taking away and then rewarding positive, adding in? We are taking away the movement forward, right? We are taking away the treats. So we're not giving this puppy any treats for pulling like that. And we're also not moving forward. So we're taking away forward motion and treats. All right. So the two questions I want you to ask when you're working with your puppy is, what am I training and how am I doing it? Really simple, right? Okay. We've talked a lot about these three different techniques, whether it's the bribes, the punishment, or the flooding. And I want to leave you with a slide and then go to questions. Um, Throughout the years, as a dog trainer in various capacities, I thought, gosh, I didn't do too well that time. That wasn't right. I did do that leash pulling. And this was way before even I started raising puppies for leader dogs. I said, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could do it better that way. This dog seems happier than the other dog that I trained. I feel horrible. But I want you to take away this quote from Emily Marushian, and it's very powerful. She said, you did the best you could with the knowledge you had in that moment. It's always easier to look back at an event and see a better choice or pathway because we already know what we learned, right? We had that experience. We know what we learned from that. But guys, hindsight happens after the lesson. So you can't condemn yourselves for not knowing the lesson before we learned it. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to do our session, because it's not about the good or the best or the worst or the bad or the wonderful or the perfect. It's about so we can know better, so we can do better. Okay, so let me exit out of this because I've asked you guys to hold your questions. And as always, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is our whole team. We've got Bev Ferguson, our supervisor. Zachary Shirk is our admin. He's an amazing, amazing person that I could not exist without. And then we've got Melissa Raymond, Laura Fisher, myself, and Barry Lynn Wood. So thank you guys. Bear with me for just a momento while I stop sharing my funny little screen here. There we are, and I come back on camera. Well, hello. So now I know that I've had a couple of questions, and I'm going to scroll up, and hopefully, if you see that I did not get it, don't be shy. Raise your hand as I'm scrolling up too. Um, okay. Oh, Kristen, it's okay if you missed it. You can see it later. All right. I'm just scrolling up, guys. All right, so we talked about Lori's comment. Kristen says, okay, we talked about that. Jane, if you've ended up with a lure turning into a bribe, how do you remedy that? Jane, that is a great question. So she's asking that if I have a lure and it turned into a bribe, how do I get rid of it, right? Real easy. You keep your hands free of food, okay? You wait for your puppy to offer. So we're going to use sit as an example. Let's say VJ uses always a lure to get her puppy into a sit. All right. And that's what I've done for months. Petunia only sits when VJ uses a kibble to lure her back. So now what I'm going to do is Petunia doesn't know sit means to put her bottom down because I've been using the food and it comes out as a bribe, right? So I'm going to say Petunia sit. Let's say she doesn't sit because she doesn't know it. And let's say she gets it and we're lucky It's like, oh my gosh, she knows the word too. Cool. I would mark yes and treat her. Now, if she doesn't no sit because she's waiting for that food, first thing, remember, keep your hands away from that pouch. If it means like you got to go like this, if it means that, wherever, for me, it's here because the dogs that I've currently worked with move so fast that I'm always trying to do the wild, wild west draw of my treat out. So I keep my hands here. I say yes and get down and I get the treat. So let's say Petunia doesn't know the word sit. You're going to look for behaviors that she does, whether it's a sit, whether it's a down, and you're going to mark yes and give her the treat. You're going to have to start back from scratch one. Okay. That's the first step. And then you're going to build on it and add the cue to it. So that was a great question, Jane. And if I didn't clarify that, please raise your hand. Getting a lot of attention for behavior. These comments are great, guys. The look works with children. Hello, sorry, Fujimoto. Okay. All right. All right, Mike. If you have a puppy, thanks, that is, oh, you're welcome. If you have a puppy that is not fazed by anything and is doing things to get attention, how do you address this behavior? It seems that luring them off something or giving them a treat or a Kong to do something different is like rewarding them for the bad behavior, and they keep repeating it to either get the attention and or the treat. You know what, Mike? I'm glad you brought this up because you brought up a very, very skilled level of puppies that we have. They build chains of behavior. Okay, so you're absolutely right. If every time that dog gets on the couch and you whip out the Kong, right? And you put it on the floor, they're going to be like, okay, that's the reward. But here's the thing. If they're on the couch, that is your clue that this puppy likes this behavior. And it's reinforcing them because the couch is comfortable. The couch they can see everywhere. So what can I do to make something else even better than that? You can set up beds elsewhere. If they're already doing the behavior, all right, I'm going to whip out Crazy VJ because Crazy Exciting VJ really gets the dogs going because they think that there's nothing greater and more fabulous than what I have. So sometimes it might be a Kong. Sometimes I might run around and say, woohoo, let's go. So there's this constant change of something happening that's a lot more exciting than that couch to get them off. Then comes the management piece. So if you know your puppy's excited about the couch, you're going to barricade it and just prevent that. All right. So and I would like to answer it more in depth if you need it, so you can unmute, but there's a variation. Our puppies are real good at building chains of behavior, and they watch us a lot more than we realize. So I've had to do things like variate the behaviors that I ask. So instead of always asking for a sit, I might ask for a touch and then treat them and get them away from there. I might get a bone, a chew toy, like a Nylabone or something. I might even call come. I might kick the leash out. There are different things that you can do, but don't be repetitive. And never, ever turn that into a bribe because you're very correct. You're absolutely correct, Mike. It can definitely become a bribe. And that's where not only, and I've said this a lot, not only do you have plan A, you have to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, all as many as you can. All right. Because they've got plans too. They're ahead of us. So if that did not help you and you need to clarify it, please let me know, Mike. But that was a lovely, lovely question. And Mike, you have another question. You say if they are pulling, do not give them a treat at your knee to get them back into heel position then. You definitely can give them a treat. But here's the thing. I have Petunia pulling me. If Petunia pulls me, I stop. The minute she looks at me, I can mark yes and give her the treat. But Mike, you already asked this in the other question. You said, well, they're going to repeat it, right? And yeah, I've got to be careful. So the next time, once I mark yes, she's back in heel, I might take a little step to the left, mark yes. Then I might take 2 steps forward and mark yes. Then I might not even mark yes and just give her a treat for hanging out. So your loose leash is a behavior pattern that you're going to create, but you got to be varied because remember, your puppy's already thinking that when I go to the end of the leash, they stop, I come back, I get a treat. But I can still go to the other end of the leash. I could go again and they will mark and they will give me when I stop and give me a treat, right? So we got to vary it out. So what the general concept they're going to get out of this variation is that Petunia's going to think, man, VJ always treats me when I'm here. And it's a lot less, chaotic because I don't have to think about it. I can sniff as long as I'm hanging out in this area, I'm good to go. Okay. So I hope that helps. I'm scrolling down slowly, guys. So Lori says, Mike, that's what my hubby says all the time. We reward them to stop doing bad things and then they repeat. Right. So, is this a Mars or Venus? All right. Sometimes your comments, Lori, just make me feel so happy. All right. Susan says, is it okay to use kibble to keep focus while training to heal? If so, how do you keep her from lunging for the kibble? Also, how to train her to accept the kibble gently. Sometimes the dog, sometimes she does, other times she doesn't. All right, Susan. So for kibble, I work with kibble when I'm in the least distractive environment. So that means my home. That means maybe in my driveway until my puppy can give me this behavior consistently. So let's take, for example, the loose leash. You asked about, well, training her to heel. Yeah. So let's say about the heel. VJ's most boring place is her office. So I treat with kibble because there's nobody in the office. It's empty. The walls are bare. The floor is bare. It's just boring. I have a leash. I'll do a couple sessions, maybe 1 or 2. Sometimes I only get to do 1 session, and I'll train in the room, in the office. The next room would be the living room. The next room might be the dining room. The next room might be the dining area where there's a lot of hubbub. Then I'll take it to the driveway. So, but when I go from the office to these other areas, I mix in some good stuff. I might mix in some jerky. I might mix in maybe something else that they don't get, but it's like a trail mix. So that keeps Petunia thinking that, okay, I get rewarded. It might be kibble, it might be something else. Eventually, what happens though, Susan, is they do work for kibble. We just need to get them to understand that this is rewarding to hang out because they're going to have such a big reinforcement history to hang out in heel position. Okay, so we build up to just the kibble. Oh, I lost it, Susan. All right. I think I missed. Oh, yeah. Hold on, Susan. It just left. Okay, all right. And you asked about accept kibble gently. That is another great question. So for accepting kibble gently, there is an exercise in our puppy raiser manual. Melissa Raymond's called it the clamshell. I call it the leave it exercise. And for mouthy puppies, it's really good. You can just have a piece of kibble or a really high value treat in your hand, closed fist. It could be your right, it could be your left. And I think Barry Lynn Wood might have shown this game too. And the other hand has the exact same thing, but it's hidden behind your hand, behind your back. You present the hand, the fist, and your puppy's going to lick at it, mouth at it. The millisecond that your puppy pulls away, you're going to mark yes, put that fist away, and give the other hand. Sometimes some trainers like to offer that same treat. It's preference. It's up to you. I don't. I want them to know that they left this alone and that's awesome. But guess what? I've got this. And you keep working with this game until eventually, if you have your hand open, they won't take it. You mark yes, put that hand back, and give them the treat. So this game comes in different variation. What this helps is that mouthiness and that lunging forward. The other thing you can do is what we call pizza delivery. So if this is the mouth of the dog and this is your kibble, you're going to deliver it right into the mouth and back it up. So I'm not pushing my puppy, but I'm delivering it right to them. There is no need for them to go boom, because that's coming right to them. And they learn that that kibble is going to come to them. I hope that answered your question, Susan. That was a wonderful one. And I think, let me see, Lori. All right, Lori Mars. Okay, you're very welcome. Lori says, I have a 7-month-old, had to be carried downstairs during Sunday night's tornado warnings here in Illinois. I'm so sorry. We also had to carry her back upstairs. It's fully finished basement with carpeted stairs. She will go down the outside Trex stack stairs to the yard. 1 story of the ground. It seems nothing will get her to go to the basement. She tries to slide down 4 stairs in spread eagle position and then stops and turns around to head back up. What bribe or lure can we use? So first of all, no bribe, no lure. This is something that is so traumatizing and fearful for them. I have a Great Dane Golden mix, and he is extremely petrified. He is 7 years old. He is extremely petrified of thunderstorms and of showers or rain, and he starts even before they start appearing. He wasn't like that when he was a year old, but he's developed it. Now, how and why and what triggered it, I do not know. So what we do is we manage him. There is no bribe. There is no lure. There is no treat in the world that will make Griffin happy in this instant. But there is comfort. So if you have this 7-month-old puppy, what you did, carry her down the stairs and give her a space for her to be away from all that, that's wonderful. Music, just sitting down with her, um, but and then maybe once she's understood that she's not in that, then you can incorporate some food toys and something else. But I'd like you to get with either me or Melissa or Laura or even Barry Lynn Wood, and we can go over a few more things for you. But there's definitely not a bribe, not a lure that's going to help that puppy, because that's an intense fear. And bribing or luring is just not the thing to do. All right, she'll do half height of stairs. I'm so sorry to hear that, Marlo. Okay. So I've answered the questions in the chat box. I'd like to ask anyone if there is one, any clarification that needs to be made, and two, outside is the same height, so it's odd, Lori. All right, so two, if you have any other questions that you have, please raise your hand. You guys were wonderful. Your questions were amazing as well. And thank you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your fun summer months to come and hang out with us. I appreciate it. Looks like no other questions. Well, have a wonderful one. And please reach out. Your puppy counselors are always there to support you. If you have questions, and puppy development's here to support you as well. And I think I keep looking for questions just to make sure I didn't miss anyone, guys. But have a wonderful one. Take care.